Welcome back. This is Raw with Nick V. Today we're going to be talking about why you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be in the game. Now, a lot of people, majority of people that we come across through speaking with a business or just life in general, really, are waiting for the perfect time to invest. Waiting for the perfect time for anything, to do anything really. But the perfect time to invest. The perfect market, the perfect deal, the perfect whatever. The perfect amount of savings, right? I haven't got enough savings. The truth is that there is no such thing as perfect. Okay? While these people are waiting for the perfect market, the perfect deal, to have the perfect savings amount, time keeps moving. Nothing is going to wait. And when you're talking about building wealth in property, the longer you wait, the narrower the window gets for you to actually build wealth. It's as simple as that. Now, let's talk about perfection. Because in a lot of areas, I would see myself as a perfectionist in some areas, not all. But let me tell you this, out of the experiences that I've had. Now, for those that don't know, I have the better part of 2 decades experience in property and finance. All right, I had a near 2-decade career in banking with a whole variety of different roles. Obviously built my own portfolio. And now I run a 7-figure business helping people buy property. And through that, we've had a lot of interaction with people, a lot of interaction with investors, some very successful investors, some mediocre investors, and some wannabe investors, to be real. Now, I'm not calling anyone out here, but let me just tell you from experience that the people that are the perfectionists when it comes to property investing, they're the wannabe investors. And I'll give you an example. You get people that they want to get into the market, they know the value of it, but they wait for the perfect deal. And not just on price. It's got often not much to do with price and everything to do with how the property looks. No, I don't want to buy that property because I don't like the kitchen. Okay, well, you just missed out on $20,000 of instant equity we could have got. But anyway, okay. No, I don't want to buy that property because I don't like that the carpets aren't in perfect condition, or I don't like that the configuration of the property. Waiting for these types of deals, these types of investors, they are wannabe investors. Because if you're looking at a property from purely a perspective of what it looks like, I'm sorry to say, you're not an investor. You're a property collector. Because a real investor is looking at a property in terms of what the numbers actually say. And I want to give you an example. I've got this bit of paper that came yesterday in the mail. Now, this is for one of my properties. Let me show you. You can see it's from the Valuer General, a notice of valuation for one of my properties in New South Wales. Now, this property here is worth about 1.2 mil-ish, right? The valuation detail, let me show you this. The valuation detail comes back with a land value of $704,000. So let me say it again. This property, if I were to sell it, I could probably get around 1.2 million for it, maybe a bit more. Bank value is about 1.2 mil. Of that value, $704,000 is the value of the land on which that house sits on. Do you get the point? The point being, the house on the land is essentially worthless. There's a 400,000 or and some change. It's not nothing. But the land on which it sits on is worth more than the actual bricks and mortar of the house. So as an investor, if you're worried about what the house looks like, you're missing the point, because the value is not in the house. The house loses its value every single year. It deteriorates, literally. But what does the land do? The land increases in value. And that is the fundamental key of investing. And the reason why I'm saying this is because you don't need to perfect finding the right house. You just need to be in the game to make that wealth happen for you. That's it. You can get rid of that now. Don't need it. But that's the name of the game, is not trying to find the perfect house. The house doesn't matter. It's the land in which it sits on that grows you as the investor, the wealth that you are after. The house is simply a means to generate cash flow when you're talking about a residential bit of land. Because a residential bit of land doesn't actually provide anything to you in terms of cash flow. Because you just had an empty block of land sitting in a suburb, it's not going to, unless you put some sheep on it, you're probably not allowed to, but it's just going to sit there, right? It'll still increase in value, but you're not earning any income from it. So property is a game of having the land so you can grow your wealth, right? Having an income producing asset on the land, which is the property that provides the income. And that's it. So if you're there and you're looking to get into the market and you're sitting there trying and trawling through realestate.com, searching for the best looking kitchen, the house that looks the best, you're not an investor. You're a property collector. So I share that with you because done is better than perfect. Being in the game is better than perfect. Having the momentum, right, is better than perfect. It's so critical. It's so critical. Momentum is better than precision as it relates to property and building wealth in property. Because there really is only one way to learn this game. You can sit and watch potties like this and read books and all sorts of things. But the reality is, the only way to learn is by doing. And if you're waiting for the perfect savings amount, the perfect time, the perfect market, guess what? You're not doing. You're just waiting on the sidelines. You're actually just missing out. And in many ways, just costing yourself money by doing so. Now, I will say, to put the caveat out there, because there are some people that can't actually piece things together properly. I'm not saying to go out there and buy any property. I'm not saying that all bits of land go up in value, because there's really two components to building wealth in property. And this is what not many buyer's agents will actually tell you, because you'll see their marketing, and we're guilty of it too. Marketing is marketing. Our client made $200,000 in 3 years because we bought this property. When the reality is, the two parts to that equation is that property has grown in value for two reasons. Number one, is that property grows in value because of inflation. The property grows in value because the currency has lost its value, and therefore you need more of it to buy the same thing. That's the number one reason why properties grow in value. Yes, there's things like demand, which are an important factor and a very important factor, because you can't just have inflation to increase property values. And a great example of that is you go into these little country towns, in far western New South Wales or wherever it might be, with very small populations. They don't grow in value, and especially they don't have double their value in a few years, because there's the second part of the equation, which is the demand. Without the demand, you don't have that significant growth. So you need to have those two things in order for your property and your portfolio to grow in value. Now, I'm simplifying that at a very high level. What drives demand? There's a whole range of different things that drive demand. And there's lots of things you can look at. There's lots of data you can look at. Migration policy plays a big part in this as well. All you got to look at is places like Australia, places like Canada. What's happened in those two countries? Property market's gone crazy. Why? Because there's been tons of net overseas migration, which in turn fuels demand. All right, then you can add further things like that and look at developers land banking and not releasing new properties as quickly as they probably could, right? Because if they flood the market, what happens? There's an oversupply, demand decreases, and therefore the value of properties decrease along with it too. There's things like corporate interests, the banking interest in Australia. Government, really, too. Heavily, I don't want to say backed by property, but have a heavy hand in property. So the value of their books relates to the value of yours and my properties. So it's in their best interest to make sure that the property prices stay as high as they can. That's the real value. That right there, a lot of people, that right there is a shit ton of value in itself. I could probably wrap up this potty and you can walk away with some hectic value. So back to you as an investor, trying to wait for the perfect time. Every investor that I know, including myself, who's built wealth in property, has done it when it doesn't feel right. Before they felt ready. Right, I remember buying my first property and I wasn't ready, but I just did it. Call it foolish, call it silly, call it reckless, call it risky, but I knew I didn't know everything. And I'd spent years prior increasing my knowledge. Hell, I even worked writing loans for people to buy property. I was in the game from my career standpoint. And on the side, I'd be watching podcasts, reading books, speaking to people, going to seminars, all those sorts of things. And even then, I didn't know enough. Like, I didn't even know what settlement was. I was like, how does this work? What settlement? Like, what is that? How does the cash flow work? I knew some degree of that. So I didn't know everything, but I went and did it. And so the point that I'm making here is you can sit there and try and wait for you to be like, okay, yep, everything works, everything click, all the dots are connected. Okay, let me now go and do it. Because I tell you what, until you buy property, all the dots won't connect. And in fact, until you start buying multiple properties, all of the dots won't connect. Because there are lots of different things to understand with property. It's not just about going to buy one, putting a tenant in there. Because when you start becoming more of a sophisticated investor, you start to look at things like structuring. I didn't really understand trusts, let alone a self-managed super fund, until many years after buying my very first property and actually having, I think I had about 5 or 6 properties before I started to really understand about, oh, okay, that's what discretionary trusts do. That's why you would want to invest in a discretionary trust. Oh, okay, that's what happens in a self-managed super fund? All right, let me go and do that. So every investor that I know that has built wealth in property has done so before it felt right. Because you will learn as you go. I'm a big fan of progress over perfection. With all aspects of life, with business, with property, with exercise. For me at the moment, I think I mentioned in the last potty, I've been working out consistently now for well over 10 years. And lately, I haven't had the perfect workout. I haven't had the perfect amount of energy because we've been very busy, business, all those sorts of things. But I'm still progressing, right? I'm still working out, albeit it might not be as intensive and it might not be as heavy and it might not be, as perfect lifts and all those sort of things, but I'm still doing it because it's about progress. That's the name of the game. Progress. And before I wrap this up, there is a big cost of you waiting for the perfect moment. And like I just mentioned at the start of the potty, or a few minutes ago, you sit on the fence and you wait. Inflation never stops. We all know this, right? It's been in the headlines a lot in the last, 2 years. But that's not the only time inflation has existed. Inflation has existed ever since this system that we have has been invented. It's just how it works. I actually fully don't completely understand it, right? More money gets printed, there's more of it, then it becomes worthless, I think is the simple way to put it, or worth less. As time goes on, more of it gets made. There's more of it in circulation. It's now worth less than what it once was. That is happening every single year. And this is why you see so many stories of property investors having doubled their wealth. It's not because they're smart or they chose the right markets. The right market has a factor to play, absolutely. But the fact of the matter is they were just in a market. They just took the chance. They just did the thing. So here's my advice to you as an investor or as someone who wants to be an investor, or maybe you've got a couple of properties and you're kind of like, hey, do I pull out the equity and go again? It's too risky, it's too much debt or whatever. Here's my take. Here's what I've done personally. Every single time I have been able to buy a property from a financial perspective, I've gone and done it. First property took ages to save because I didn't have any other assets. I had to save cash to go and use the deposit. Every single property after that has all been equity. Property grows in value because inflation happens, and I bought in the right areas where there's demand. Use the equity that I could service. And when I say service, for those that might not understand, is the bank was willing to lend me more money, essentially. I use that, I go and buy another property. And just fucking rinse and repeat that over and over again. And you might be going, okay, cool, but you said, not all properties grow in value. Where can I be looking? Here's my simple take on it. I'm a simple man. Number one is if you can buy a house in a capital city and you can afford the holding costs, and you know what the holding costs are before you buy a house in a capital city. Buy it on a nice chunky block of land. Like I said, the value is in the land, all right? If you cannot afford to buy a house in a capital city, look for a large regional center. As I said, you can make this as complicated or as easy as possible. I'm just giving you my advice on if you're sitting on the fence and you're not sure, what do I do? Buy in a capital city if you can afford it. If not, go to a large regional center. to buy freestanding houses. If you cannot do that, that's when you go back to the capital city and you go, oh, can I afford a townhouse in this capital city? If not, then and only then, look at apartments. But do not buy high-rise apartments as an investment. If you have to buy an apartment, buy like a 1 to 2, maximum 3-story apartment, as close to the city as possible in gentrifying locations. Okay? And you'll do well. The longer you hold it, the better you do. And I'll give you an example from my own portfolio. Every single property I bought has been negatively geared. Why? Because I bought houses in high demand locations, and they always are negatively geared for a while. Now, when I first bought my properties, I like to forecast about where it might go, because I don't like just to buy and then go, okay, what happens now? I like to buy and go, okay, I'm expecting this property to be worth X amount in 5 years' time. I'm expecting the cash flow to be whatever it might be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, whatever. It's important to do, because after all, we're investors, right? We're not property collectors. Now, almost, or in fact, every house that I have bought has pretty much done the exact same thing in terms of its forecasted growth. At the 5 to 7 year mark, these properties that were once negatively geared now shift to positively geared assets. Why? Because of the two sides of the coin, inflation and demand. Because remember, inflation doesn't just push up the price of the property. Inflation also assists in rents increasing along with it. As does demand. Demand not only pushes up the price of the property, demand also aids the increase in rental income every single year. So long as you're buying in the right market, remember. So you now have assets that you hold for 5 years. You cop it on the chin. It's negatively geared. Remember, it's a tax deduction on your earned income. So it's not a total loss, which is unique to this country. And then now you have assets that increase in value significantly because they're in high demand locations, but also are now positively geared. It doesn't cost me anything to hold the property. This is, in my head, a fucking no-brainer. Like, as if you would not do that. As if you would not take that chance to go, all right, it's going to maybe cost me $100 a week for 5 years. That's a lot of money, don't get me wrong. But it's $100 a week. Like, if you're on $100 grand a year and you want to tighten up your spending a little bit so you have that wealth in the background that eventually is going to fully pay for itself, it's a fucking no-brainer. The only caveats to that is if you refinance and you pull out equity, then obviously that will then change the equation, because you're pulling out equity, you're increasing the debt position of the property. More debt means there is more to repay, and then that timeline pushes out a little bit further. But for a lot of the properties that I own, there's been, I think, three, maybe 4 properties out of 10 that I've released equity from. The rest are just sitting there. So that's the cost of waiting. The cost of waiting is your wealth at the end of the day. That's it. So let's wrap this up. You don't need to have it all together. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to start. And you might start messy. You might start unsure, but just start. You will figure things out as you go, because like I said, that's how every investor I know has done it. No one ever had 100% of the knowledge and then took the plunge. You can't get 100% of the knowledge without taking the plunge. So if you're serious about getting in the game and you want help doing it smart, that's literally what I do every single day. I help investors like yourself start. I help educate you along the way, ideally, so you don't need me to buy the second property. And that's not the smartest business decision, but I'm not in this as a purely monetary thing. I've got a portfolio, it's doing all right. I've got a business, it's doing all right. I get more satisfaction out of seeing someone's eyes open and go, oh, okay, this is how it works. That's how you get it done. Okay, thank you, Nick. And we have a lifelong connection. We have a lifelong friendship. That to me is far more valuable than a transaction of the monetary kind. So I hope you got some value out of that. There was some value in that. Whether it's resonated or sunk in yet, it might take some time in the days after this. Listening to this, you might be in the car, going to work or whatever. Let that sink in. Inflation and demand; those are the two key things that push up property prices. That's all we got time for. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, catch you soon.